That's actually offensive to some degree.
Where's the cat?
You've got to bump that,
Okay, here we go.
and then
Thanks.
okay, that's better. Okay, our first order is to call the meeting to order. Item number 2 on our agenda is to approve the minutes of the meeting of July 8th, 2021. I have a motion and a second. Please record your vote. Item is approved. Item 3 is the consent docket, and you'll see item 3C is our annual actuarial valuation as of 12/31/2020. So we'll go ahead and welcome Louise, let her do her report, and then we'll approve the consent docket following that.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Good to see you.
It's great to be here, and it's so good to see everyone in person. Can you hear me okay, or
Yep.
do you think I need to take off my mask?
No.
Okay,
You're good.
I'll keep my mask on. Well, I'm going to talk about the results of the most recent actuarial evaluation of the retirement system. And fundamentally, our job as actuaries is to measure the liabilities of the system and to determine a contribution rate, in this case, that is sufficient to fund those obligations in an orderly manner. If you didn't have actuarial valuations, the city would have to find a way to come up with about $41 million in fiscal 2023. But the contribution requirement based on having actuarial work done over many years is really going to be far less, maybe in the area of 9 to 10 million. And it's really the contributions and the investment income that they generate is how you're going to pay for these important benefits. On page A-2 of your report, we have one of the main findings, namely the city's contribution for what we call fiscal 2023, FY 2023. And at the bottom of the page, there's a comparison of the contribution for fiscal 2023 versus fiscal 2022. The very last row, the city contribution. The contributions are expressed as percents of employee payroll, the employees covered by this system. And the city takes these contribution rates and it applies them to payroll during the appropriate fiscal year, in this case fiscal 2023, to determine a dollar contribution to the retirement system. And you can see, compared to last year, the city's contribution is lower. And that's really the direct result of what we call favorable experience. In particular, the investment experience was very good for calendar year 2020. So we do our calculations as of evaluation date, and for the purpose of this report, December 31st, 2020. And we come up with a contribution for the city's 2023 budget year. So during calendar year 2020, the rate of return on investments was over 15%, which is larger than our long-term assumed rate. And this information is shown starting on page B as in boy -3. So on B-3, you have an excerpt of the city's, of the financial statements for the retirement system. And you see member and city contributions coming into the pension plan, totaling over 17 million. And then you see investment income before expenses, about 122 million. Benefits paid during the year, and that includes, I think, lump sum payments for the partial lump sum payment option. So folks in your system can elect to receive part of their benefits in cash in a lump sum up to $30,000. So, and then their benefit is reduced proportionately to account for that. I believe that's included in the 41 million shown there. And then you have administrative and investment expenses. But during the year, the market value of assets, which is what's shown here, increased by $94.5 million. So really a very good year for the retirement fund. And so, although this shows the market value of assets held in trust, as actuaries, we use a market-related value, and that's shown on the following page, B-4 of your report. So most people think of assets as the market value of securities. However, if we were to use simply the market value of securities held in trust, it would make it very difficult for Brent to budget for the necessary contributions. And that's because of market volatility, which flows through directly to contribution volatility. So what we do is we smooth out the investment gains and losses using this smoothing method, which is a very common practice among public funds. And you see the details on page B-4. A lot of numbers here, but you can see with items B and C the market value at the beginning and the end of the year, an increase of almost 95 million. Item E1 is the investment income that was generated net of expenses, so net of investment and administrative expenses. What we expected the fund to earn is shown in item E2, the 52.4 million. So you end up with what we call an investment gain of $66.5 million. And that gets phased in over a 4-year period, as you know. And so we end up with a funding value of assets of about $816 million at the end of the year. And you can see that that's lower than the market value at the end of the year. So what this means is that over the next 3 years, you have investment gains that are going to be released. And so that will either enhance favorable investment income going forward, or it'll help to offset unfavorable investment income going forward. And at the bottom, we have the market rate of return. That's net of expenses, about almost 15.4%. And then on an actuarial basis, it's lower because we're phasing in the favorable investment experience. But really a very good year for investments for the retirement system. It's interesting, the capital markets have been really volatile. If you had a June 30th measurement date, your return on investment would almost certainly be quite a bit lower, probably lower than the assumed rate of return. And we also saw that for plans that had a measurement date of September 30th. So I'm happy to see this as a rate of return. But in addition to the investment experience, on page B-11, what we saw in your plan for calendar year 2020 is consistent with what we saw for other plans, namely a higher number of deaths than what we would expect to see in normal course. The likely reason for this is the pandemic. And although this is certainly bad news for the individual and sad news for their families, it has a favorable financial impact on your retirement system because it means fundamentally that you'll be paying out less in benefits than what was anticipated by actuarial assumptions. So it ends up being a financial gain to the system, although at the expense of many retiree deaths. On page B-11, we have a sort of a reconciliation of retirees and their benefits. You can see the very last row, 2020, that there were 82 deaths during the year, a higher number than any other in the last 10 years. In terms of additions to the rolls, that includes new retirees from city employment, as well as survivor beneficiaries who, in some cases, when a retiree dies, there's a potential for a survivor based on the benefit election. And it also includes some retirements from deferred status, so people who quit city employment came back to elect their benefit. So this favorable experience was offset in part by unfavorable experience. That's shown on page B as in boy -8 of your report. So during calendar year 2020, the pays for folks in this retirement system were higher than long-term expectations. And Regina did a great job of tracking down the reasons for this, and there were a number of reasons that this occurred. In part, there was an extra pay period in 2020, which accounted for part of the increase. There was some overtime for folks in your system who get overtime, higher levels of overtime than what we observed in the past. Some of it related to the pandemic, some of it not. And then a small piece of it due to a stipend payment, retroactive payment in 2020. So to the extent that you have pay growing at a higher rate than what's anticipated, it increases our assessment of retirement system benefits in the future because your benefits are pay related. And that in turn increases our assessment of liabilities. But the investment experience and the death experience actually far exceeded the impact of pays. So the pay experience really just partially offset the other favorable experience. And,
I have a question.
sure.
You talked about that stipend. So the stipend is something that we do, it does hit against the retirement system? Okay. It's a pensionable thing, okay. All right, thank you.
Yeah, in terms of the grand scheme of things, Brent, small potatoes, yeah, since it's $200. Actually, on page B-8, we also have we show a 20-year history of the employee and deferred member population in your pension plan. And so you can see that from the second column to the far right, these are the number of employee members in your plan. And it's not stable. It kind of bobs up and down a little bit, as does the payroll. But looking at the very last column, you can see the increase in average pay and how much bigger it is than what's been observed in the past. And on page A, like Apple, -4 of your report, we have a summary of system liabilities in quite a bit of detail, as well as system assets. And I want to direct your attention to the very last column on the far right, titled Overall. This is the system's funded ratio or funded percent over the last 20 years. These are really good numbers. The system's funded ratio is assets divided by liabilities. It's a common measure of the financial strength of the retirement system. So the higher the number, the stronger the financial position of the system. And as of 2020, and this is using a smoothed asset value, the system is 98% funded. If we were to use the market value of assets, the system would be about 106% funded. So I was curious about, as I always am, about how this system compares to some of the other big statewide systems, particularly those that two of them would cover public safety employees from the city. So what I found is, I think, consistent with what I've seen in the past. Your system in 2020 is better funded than OSER's, than the police system, and the statewide firefighter system. You're just much better funded. So certainly something to be proud of, and really a reflection of some of the good decisions that this board and prior boards have made with respect to funding this plan. So really something to be proud of. And again, overall, a very good year for the retirement fund. And that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone might have.
I have just a comment and a question, if you would, over here.
Sure.
Being a non-practicing certified public bean counter, I dug into this and ticked and tied all the schedules to learn out how this works, and doggone it, I couldn't find an error anywhere in the report. So congratulations to you and staff on putting one together, and I think you did a really good job of explaining it. I had a few other questions, but you've pretty well covered those. I would just say, just overall generally, you have pointed out that under our two methods that we have the market value of assets and the actuarial value of assets, how, in the market it seems to be, well, I guess it can go either way, but right now it would be somewhat maybe overstating the value. That may not be correct because it would be stated correctly, but it would show a higher rate and show us performing better. So I think I understand, the difference of the smoothing that out. and making that a little bit easier to budget things and control, you know, how we would make the contribution determinations in those. Is there any other pros and cons that maybe you could fill in on that, on between the two ways of valuing the system, the valuing the assets?
Well, let's see. So using the market value of assets to measure the system's funding percent is, it's a number that shows up actually as of a different date, but it shows up in the citywide financial statements because based on accounting standards, the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, you have a duty to calculate the funding percent based on the market value. So I guess one comment would be they're not consistent. They're not consistent because of the different asset values used and also the different measurement dates. June 30, you know, tied to the city's fiscal year versus December 31st, the plan year. In terms of, it's not so much which one is better, but on page A-4, if you look at that last column, when you use a smoothed asset value, it gives you a better sense of what's happening in your system in terms of long-term trends, which is something an actuary looks at. When you use the market value of assets, the problem is this number bounces all over the place, consistent with market volatility. And so it becomes a lot harder to discern what's happening. They both have a role in terms of financial reporting, but they're different.
Well, thank you for that answer, and thank you for a very good report. Appreciate that.
My pleasure.
Any other comments, questions for Louise?
Yeah, I was just wanted to say, I remember it was last year at this time when we looked at our assumptions, and we thought as a result of those assumptions, our contribution rate was going to have to go up. It was going to cost us more money, and I was not expecting, I was expecting our 96.1% to go down more than likely. And to me, this is a huge blessing to the system when I look at it now and wake up and we're at 98%. I just want to commend the board for their actions on that time, and just I feel very fortunate. So thank you.
Okay.
Louise, thank you
Oh, Jim.
very much for your work and your presentation. Thank you, Louise, for your work and your presentation. I appreciate it. And I wanted to thank you for the formatting on that development evaluation assets table. I've always struggled with that, and really like the way you've laid that out now so that it's real obvious what we're going to be recognizing in the future in the years. Thank you. Appreciate that.
My pleasure, Jim.
Thank you as always. Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we will commence with item number 3, which is a consent docket, having received Louise's report. Chair will entertain a motion. I have a motion and a second. Please record your votes. Item passes. Okay, item number 4 is to ratify approvals. We have several items. Have a motion and a second. Please record your vote. Item is approved. Item number 5 is to approve the claims docket. I have a motion and a second. Please record your vote. Item is approved. Item 6 is to approve the following applications for service retirement. Have a motion and a second on item 6. Please record your vote. Item is approved. Item 7 is receive report of death, authorize payment of the $5,000 death benefit, and approve continuation of pension to spouse. Have a motion and a second. Record your vote. Item passes. Item 8, receive report of death, authorize payment of the $5,000 death benefit, authorize secretary to make necessary changes to conform on the following. Have an item and a second. Record your vote. Item passes. Item number 9, receive report of death. Authorize secretary to make necessary changes to conform on the following. Have a motion and a second. Please record your vote. Item passes. Item 10 is to approve the following application for vested rights. Have a motion and a second. Record your vote. Item passes. Item number 11 is to approve request of the following to terminate vested rights and commence retirement benefits. Have a motion and a second. Please record your vote. Item passes. Item number 12 is it's an item for individual consideration. Enter into executive session on the advice and recommendation of the municipal counselor to receive confidential communications from legal counsel concerning a pending investigation involving potential litigation in regard to the recovery of alleged overpayment of retirement benefits as authorized by Title 25, Oklahoma Statutes 2021, because disclosure would seriously impair the ability of the OCRS to conduct the pending investigation or potential litigation in the public interest. So we'll have to take a roll call vote, but first I need a motion and a second to enter into executive session. Have a motion and a second? Do we all vote at once? Okay, we can vote that way. You go ahead and vote. Okay, the item passes. We will go ahead into executive session and be out hopefully very shortly.
Take your microphone off before you walk away.
Yeah. Okay, we are back. The next item on the agenda is item number 13, receive investment consultant report. Regina got word from Jason that he tried to get here going through Atlanta, which that's his business, but he didn't make it. He got delayed by storms, and the earliest he could get here would be 11 o'clock this morning. So he's provided some notes to Regina on our performance, and she's going to do her best to pass those on to us this morning.
Good morning, Chairman and Board. The one thing Jason wanted to point out, I think you all have the quarterly report, and you should have a monthly and a quarterly at your station, is on page 26 of the quarterly report. That's the main thing he wanted me to hone in on, if you want to flip to that. This page shows the very strong performance of the ERS. The 10-year performance, if you look at the bar graph at the top, is over 9.5%, where the blue bar, 9.5%, where the policy index that we're comparing against was 8.63. And then our peers are in that mustard color, and the peers are other portfolios with similar equity composition. They performed over a 10-year period at 8.55. And then specifically the purple shaded is peers of other public defined benefit plans. They performed 8.64. So then looking at the bottom part of that page 26 where it says ranking, the rankings themselves on a 10-year basis, the OCRS portfolio was in the top 20% of all portfolios with a similar equity composition. That means they outperformed 80% of those peers. And then similarly, they ranked in the top 16% of all public defined benefit plans, meaning that they outperformed 84% of all of those peers. And the peers themselves, the numbers for those are at the bottom where it says observations, if you want to know how many we're talking about. On the monthly investment report, just since last month, it's relatively flat, but the one-year rolling return was 23% gross of fees, and through the end of July. Jason said there's no manager concerns, issues, or anything that at this time. And he wanted me to remind, I know we were planning on manager reports this month, but that kind of fell through. And then he did want to let you guys know that ACG has scheduled a representative from Morgan Stanley Prime Property Fund to come next month at the September meeting. And then in the October meeting, they've lined up both of the emerging markets managers to come, Wasatch and Wells Capital Emerging Markets Fund. So if anybody has any questions, I may have to just take notes and get back to you, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have, Chair will entertain a motion on item number 13. And motion to second. Please record your vote. Item is approved. Item 14 is comments from board, staff, and citizens. Does anyone have anything this morning for the good of the cause? Okay. Hearing none, we